Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. My name is Jimmy Good, and I'm your host. And joining me this week, a very special guest, Mr. Ben Moore from Easy Allies. Ben, how are you doing, pal?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, man.
Well, thank you for being on. It's been a little while since we've gotten a chat like this, and it's something I've been looking forward to for a long time. I know our Legionnaires have been kind of like calling for it. They're like, "Where's Ben? Get Ben on the show." And I'm like, "All right, I'm working on it." Right? Yeah, but life's been good with you. You've been playing a lot of games and all that jazz.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of games. There are points where I feel like I have like a nice balance of things. Like, oh, I'll do a little bit of games, watch a little TV. I feel like the last few weeks it's been mostly just games, but that's good. I'm playing some good stuff, playing some less than good stuff as well, but mostly good stuff. So.
Oh, I like that. That's a good tease for later on. But yeah, if you're joining us for the first time here, we talk about, all the greatest things, movies, games, TV shows, all those things. And for everybody who's joining us for like the 114th episode, thank you so much for hanging out with us here. So we like to start off with a little bit of news before we get into the main topic of the day. And there's two bits of news I want to get to. Now, right before we started recording this on Wednesday, we're getting a Battlefield 5, and we have a reveal trailer that actually shows gameplay as well. It's kind of this continuous shot. I recommend you go checking it out so you can understand what we're talking about. But we're only going to talk about a little bit. Ben, Battlefield 5, hypometer. Where are you, man? Does this trailer help you? Does it hurt you? Where do you stand?
I thought the trailer was fine. As far as Battlefield goes, I think I'm kind of in the position with it where Battlefield isn't really in a spot where it has to win me back. I will play the new Battlefield games as they come out and enjoy them because I like Battlefield. I've liked Battlefield a long time. I played so much 1942 and have been interested in the series ever since. I really love the Battlefield structure. I love the huge maps. I love the shenanigans that you can get up to with friends. Like, as long as so many of those core elements are present, like, I'm good. And so I'm not really like somebody that needs to be sold on it. I didn't think the presentation itself was all that great or interesting or really all that necessary even. But I know a lot of people want modern Battlefield back, and I understand that. I enjoy modern Battlefield too, but I'm kind of excited about World War II. It's been a while since Battlefield has been back to World War II, and I'm interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of right there with you. But to be honest, Joe, my other cohort on here, he loves Battlefield a lot more than I do. He's more of a first-person shooter guy. And I remember playing a little bit of Battlefield 4 and then trying out a little bit of Battlefield 1. And for me, I've seen so many World War II shooters, and I kind of know what I'm going to get with this one. So you're right. I think for a lot of people, it's just kind of showing you basically what you would expect from a Battlefield World War I. The one thing I did like about this trailer, though, is that it was kind of, like I said, a continuous shot, and then eventually switched to like gameplay, which I don't know if I've ever seen a trailer really do that, where it's like focusing on other characters, and then they're like, hey, it's first person now, and you're like, whoa, okay, cool, which I enjoyed. But It looked like just bedlam, chaos, craziness. It looks like it kind of wants to be like that Call of Duty, like constant action, everyone's dying around you, like there's like a jeep that falls, and like kills some guys, and like a plane crashes, and it's like, wow, that's insane. I don't know if that was in game. I don't remember if they said before or after this was in game footage, from the precursor before you actually play as the character. But it dropped. I figure we talk about it for a second because that's just one of those things that I think we're just going to keep getting, and it's not necessarily surprising, but you said you don't have to be one back, but are you excited for this game?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there are certain games that I'm thrilled about. Like, I can't wait to really just devour Dragon Quest XI. That's a big one for me. If they announce Devil May Cry 5, which we've talked about many times, that's going to be a big one for me. Battlefield and Call of Duty aren't those games where I'm at that level. I'm not going to devour them. I'm not a super hardcore Battlefield player, but I have friends back home, or even just playing with Huber. It's something where it's kind of like a de-stress. Let's grab a beer. Let's get in a Jeep and see what happens kind of an experience for me with Battlefield. And so I wouldn't say that like I'm pumped or anything that they talked about got me pumped, but I know I'm going to get it, and I know I'm going to have, a moderately good time with it.
Yeah, for sure. You did bring up something, though, that I feel like I have to talk about for a second. I was hosting this other show, Game Sharks, and I was saying the time has come, and so have I. I've laughed last because you came to die. And people were like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Devil May Cry, guys. It's coming. Like, it's nice to talk to someone else who's like pretty excited because I'm like stoked, and it's hard to find other people who are like as excited as I am. Because I'm pretty sure it's on its way. Like, gotta be right. Like,
yeah, I hope so. It really feels like it and all of the leaks that happened, it just seems something that's inevitable. Even just like kind of hints coming out of Capcom feel like it's definitely happening. It may not come out this year, but I think we'll get word of it this year at E3 for sure. But it's interesting because like I was looking at Reset Era, and they were talking about Devil May Cry 5, and there were more people than I thought that were like, I really don't have this nostalgia. I don't have this love for Devil May Cry. Like it's okay. I would rather have Dragon's Dogma or more Monster Hunter or like Ninja Theory DMC. And I thought that was interesting because from my perspective, Devil May Cry was like foundational for the PS2. Like it was a step forward for that system and for action games in general. And there was just less love. I mean, obviously that's a super small sample size, but less love for it than I was expecting. And maybe Devil May Cry doesn't have like the name recognition that I thought it had. But for Ben Moore, I'm pumped.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that DMC kind of came in and was pretty divisive. And for people who were getting into action games around that time and having that be maybe their first entry, and for a lot of people it being the fifth entry for the series, it was so like kind of polarizing, kind of rips that apart. So maybe that's why a lot of people, there's like kind of splintering off, because it's not like, oh, we definitely had the fourth one, and I can't wait for that fifth one whenever it comes. Like, no, we had another one that didn't work really, but it was like a technically proficient game. It just wasn't beloved by the masses. So yeah, I say anybody, if you can pick up special edition of Devil May Cry 4, give it a shot, because that game is hot. Oh, ooh, it's so good. It's
for your favorite one.
Yeah. Oh, the reason why. Okay, I like 3 a lot. I like 3, and I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't really played a lot of 1 or 2. So 3 was kind of like my entry point to the franchise, and I remember thinking, oh, this is crazy and nuts. But 3 but then 4 just like takes it up another level. I love Nero. I love all the abilities and how different everybody is. I will say this though, the backtracking and the refighting of the bosses is quite horrible. It's like so annoying. But like, if they just get Virgil, like playing as Virgil, man, in that game is like freeing to me. Like I feel so powerful, and it feels so good. Like you're just flying around with them, teleporting, just ripping people apart, and you're just like might controls everything. Just like, oh, it's like, yeah, I love you so much. I love it.
I think, man, you should really give 1 a shot because I think it still holds up. It's obviously it's not as mechanically complex as 3 or 4, but I still think it's a very good game. I still think it has interesting boss fights. I think it has interesting areas. I think you'd enjoy it. And now the trilogy, the 1, 2, and 3 is out on everything. So
yeah, that's kind of the nice thing about this era too, is like, as much as that we keep getting remasters and the occasional remake, and sometimes I'm thinking like, oh, I wish we could just progress with the franchises and stuff. It is kind of nice to say like, hey, you have access to that, like a better version of the original one and all of them. It's like, oh, cool. So it's like, I do want to go back. It's not so hard to do, but yeah, I'm pretty darn stoked for it. And if there's that co-op, baby, let's do it. Yeah, back to the
absolutely.
Do you prefer Dante or Virgil? Do you have a preference?
To be honest with you, I haven't really. I've messed around with Virgil a little bit, but I haven't like gone through the game and really like gotten down the combat of Virgil. And so I'm gonna say Dante's by default. But like one of my favorite boss fights that I've ever experienced is the final fight against Virgil in DMC3. I think I've said that multiple times, but that fight was like so awesome and just very, very, very finely tuned, where it's like, no, you need to understand this game to get through the fight in a really good way.
Yeah, and he does feel a bit overpowered in some instances in Devil May Cry 4, because you're playing through that game as him like the whole time, and you get to Kyrie, Nero's kind of girlfriend's brother, Credo, and he's like that angel thing or whatever, and you fight him, but you're like just teleporting to him the whole time, and you're just like, I can get to you no matter where you are. Like, that's dang. DMC 3 is also, or Devil May Cry 3, I should say, is a great game as well. Yeah, really good.
Have you played Lady in Special Edition?
I have. Wait, was she first or was it Trish? Because it's Trish and Lady together, and then you have to play through half, and then you have to flip. Do you start as Lady?
I believe you can start as Lady, and like you can play the beginning as Lady.
I think I feel like I have played as her. I don't know.
Okay.
Do you like playing Mysterio?
She's just a very funny character. I think she makes the game a lot easier.
Sure.
Based on my memory of playing as Lady, like she's just a really simple. Like she's fun, but she's a really simple character.
Yeah, that was it like Catalina Ann or Kalina Ann, her rocket launcher, and she's just like shooting
Yes.
that around and stuff. And you're like, okay, cool. I guess like you're not a demon, but you've got infinite ammo. It's fine. I don't
Right.
think about it. Like, yeah, I remember them just adding so much to Special Edition that it's just so worth it. Like, oh man, it's so good. Anyway, we were talking about Battlefield, and we started talking about Devil May Cry. I mean, if I start talking about Dragon Quest XI, that's gonna happen.
Sure.
Another thing that you may or may not be as well versed in, but I do have to comment on it, that there are some rumors that Jake Gyllenhaal is in talks to play the villain for the next Spider-Man Homecoming, or Spider-Man Homecoming 2, the sequel, whatever they call that. But he'll be playing Mysterio. Now, Ben, do you have any like kind of history with that character?
My history with Mysterio comes directly from the 90s animated cartoon,
Sure.
which I loved as a kid. Growing up, Spider-Man was my favorite comic book hero. It's Batman now, and it's been Batman for a while. But
cool.
Yeah. It was Spider-Man because of that cartoon, which like I hear does not hold up well. But as a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with it. I loved Spider-Man. I liked Mysterio. I really liked Black Cat. And I remember the episode. I don't know if you watched the Spider-Man 90s cartoon.
I watched some of it.
Do you remember like when he turns into a spider?
Yes, that's messed up.
Yeah, that messed me up as a kid. As somebody who loved Spider-Man but didn't like spiders, it was like a weird.
Your arachnophobia met your hero in this horrible moment. You're like, I don't want to think about it like this.
Yep. But yeah, and I mean, I've read some smattering of Spider-Man here and there, but like I've never been a devout comic book follower or anything like that. But yeah, I'm familiar with the character. I like Spider-Man Homecoming as a movie. I thought it was a good movie.
Yeah, and I think, looking at where they had Vulture in that one, kind of a lower villain as far as the kind of MCU hierarchy goes, seeing Mysterio as potentially like the big bad for that sequel for Spider-Man, that makes a lot of sense to me, as opposed to saying like, hey man, like we're going to go right into Sinister Six, which they still could do if Mysterio's here. I just don't know how quickly they want to try to do all that stuff. So yeah, could be cool.
Yeah, and I think Jake Gyllenhaal's a really interesting choice because he's so good at playing like this kind of creepy weirdo. And I say that as a compliment. Like, I don't know if you've seen Nightcrawler.
Yeah, so I only know of it a little bit. I was very angry that it wasn't an X-Men standalone film. I was like, what the heck? Yeah, I've heard he's good in that.
Yeah, he's very good, like unsettlingly good. And so, yeah, I think he'd be great in that. I thought Kevin Costner was great in Homecoming. So.
Michael Keaton?
Michael Keaton!
Yeah,
I said Kevin Costner, and I meant Michael Keaton. Thank you.
I could see where you'd screw those two up, but
that's not the first time I've done that.
That's okay. They're both great.
I think they like look similar to me. They're very different people, but
yeah, I know what you mean though. I know what you mean. I can see where it is.
Michael Keaton.
Dude, Michael Keaton, he's like one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite villains. I shouldn't say Michael Keaton. The Vulture is his portrayal of that character is so good, and I just think like you get him and you have like Kurt Russell and Guardians and stuff, and you're like, you have some pretty good like old school actors who are like willing to be in these Marvel movies. I'm like,
yeah,
that's pretty good.
Have you seen Birdman?
I've seen little bits and pieces of Birdman. Okay. I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen the whole thing. Have you seen it? Did you like it?
Yes, I really like it. I really like Michael Keaton in that as well. I'm so pissed off at myself because I really like Michael Keaton and I think he's a great actor. And to call him Kevin Costner, whatever.
Dude, it's not. Don't be pissed at yourself. It's fine. We all make mistakes.
No. But like, if I didn't like the actor so much, I wouldn't even care. We could just move on. But I like and respect Michael Keaton.
Yeah, he's good, and I'm hoping to see him back in the sequel. And it sounds like he'll be there. Maybe even Scorpion will show up. They might turn this into a Sinister Six type of thing. Who knows? As long as Michael Keaton comes back, Jake Gyllenhaal might be there. Might be kind of a crazy movie, but I loved that first one. And I think after Avengers 4, which we get next May, and then this will come out in July, that'll be kind of a nice, like, hey, we're getting back into, Marvel stuff post Infinity War. Like,
right.
Could be nice.
Tangent, very quick tangent. I've said before that, like, man, I feel like I'm kind of getting sick of superhero movies, but that feeling for me has kind of been lessened because I keep doing a really good job. Like, I think the last couple of years have been really good for superhero movies, and despite the high volume of them, I'm totally okay as long as they all go in interesting and different directions. Like, I think a Spider-Man Homecoming and a Deadpool and an Infinity War all fill very different roles. And Black Panther was great as well.
Yes, I think you make a really good point. And one thing I love thinking about specifically with Black Panther, a lot of people found it refreshing, but it's actually a pretty stereotypical Marvel film, just in a brand new world with a brand new cast. And I think that's
Right.
where like people are like, "Oh, it's like the best and newest Marvel." I'm like, "Guys, that's Iron Man 1, but like they just kind of changed some stuff and they made a cool, compelling villain." Like that
Yeah.
was cool, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think structurally it's very traditional, but I think it's got a wit to it, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
Black Panther has a sharpness to it. The way that the lines are presented, the jokes that they're telling, the action that they're doing. I mean, at like the car scene, like as the car is falling apart, like that's both funny and really entertaining to watch, from kind of an action standpoint,
Yeah.
I think.
And I think it's really good to have that right before Infinity War because you have more of a stereotypical kind of Marvel film, and then you give something that is completely different, like a film
Right.
going event that is not what you would expect from like a Marvel movie, like an Avengers style movie. Because like the first two Avengers films feel very similar. And I think
Yeah.
going in, a lot of people thought, okay, it's going to be like that again. It's like, it's not. Like, it's
Right.
definitely not going to be like that.
And man, this is not like a fresh take or anything. It's been said plenty of times by plenty of people, but man, Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos has to be one of my favorite superhero live action performances that has ever happened. He's approaching like a Heath Ledger Joker territory for me, I
Dude,
think.
I love, man.
Approaching, maybe not at, but
Dude, that's fine. You could say if you want to put it's your own personal thing. Like I think the other problem with the
oh,
Heath Ledger Joker thing is if someo's dead and you say somebody's better than them, we're like, how dare you? How dare you say
well,
that?
let me put it this way. As I was watching Josh Brolin be Thanos, I was very impressed, like constantly remarking in my head, like, "Holy cow! Like he's really selling this character." I don't know if I've ever had a movie going experience like The Dark Knight. Like that was the most invested in the moment I've been in a single film. Like I was like actually sitting there on the edge of my seat. Like the scene where he comes in and he snaps the pencil. Um, with the gangsters. Like it's after the bank robbery. It's early on.
Yeah, magic trick.
Yes, the magic trick. Like I was just completely glued to the screen, enraptured by that. I've never felt like that in a movie in my life.
I wonder if a lot of that too is because of the grounded nature of the film that you feel like you're actually watching something that could potentially transpire. Whereas with Infinity War, you're watching this, you might be, kind of mesmerized, but there's still part of you that's saying, well, that's a giant purple alien man, you know?
Yeah, I think part of it is think about like how inundated we are with the concept of heroes and villains and good versus evil that when you experience these things a lot of the time you just sort of they just sort of pass over you because you expect them to be there. Your mind is so familiar with it. And when I was watching Heath Ledger be the Joker, it was a villain and in some sense like a traditional concept of a villain that actually felt really frightening to me.
Yeah.
And him being so unhinged like created this sensation of like curiosity and excitement and fear that like you just don't really get to feel all that often with villains. So
Yeah, I've heard this rumor going around, or this theory that the Joker in The Dark Knight was actually like ex-military and was like an interrogation specialist, and that's why he's so good at doing all that stuff with like explosives, and why he's good at when he is interrogated. He doesn't really give too much away or anything, and he talks about like, you don't start with the head. It makes the witness all fuzzy, and it's
right.
kind of like him saying that. I don't know. I kind of like that twist that he could be like ex special forces or something that just like went insane.
Right.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of transformative roles and stuff like that, I've tried my best, and I've seen Infinity War 3 times. No spoilers here, but Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon might be one of the best things I've ever heard because I cannot place it anymore. It's just its own thing. Like Rocket is
Yeah.
just like his own thing. I can't hear Bradley Cooper anymore. I'm like, is that really like him? Like it's so
Right.
good. I'm like, oh, I love it so much. I just love listening to him talk, and I find him to be such a compelling character as they kind of build off him over time. I'm like, yeah. He's my favorite Guardian. Do you have a favorite Guardian?
Do I have a favorite Guardian? That's a good question. I think they all work really well as an ensemble. Drax is probably the one that makes me laugh the most.
Yeah.
Okay. Because boy, that deadpan humor really sells me. I feel like I'm also kind of a sucker for main characters, and so I like Star-Lord as well.
Okay,
Quite a
sure.
bit.
Well,
But Rocket's great. I think what's so good about Rocket is there's this like, yes, he's a raccoon that likes big guns and is entertaining and jokey, but there's like this bitterness to him, this cynicism that I think really helps sell a lot of that humor and grounds him and makes him so interesting to watch. Like, he's not just a joke.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he would hate it if he was that. And also he sees himself as the captain, you know?
Right.
So that's great too. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all the news that we need to cover this week, because if we keep going on with this, it'll just turn into just a beautiful conversation, which goes who knows where. But we're going to keep some structure or some semblance of it. We had a suggestion from my good friend Fragadin on our Discord, and he wanted to talk, us to talk about like games on a broader scale. And this is basically the gist of today's main topic. Gameplay versus story in games, ratios for success, and the widening gap of AAA successes and failures. Not talking like money-wise, but like why we talk about things like Persona 5, like Breath of the Wild. We don't talk about Destiny 2, which for all intents and purposes, we probably should still be talking about it, as being like one of the biggest games of last year. So I guess where I would like to start, Ben, is you're more of a guy that seems to be, I don't want to paint you into a corner or anything, but your story's a big deal to you, wouldn't you say?
It's funny because the games that I probably hold the closest to me, I would say are heavily story focused, but I would say the last like 5-6 years or so, I've cared more about how a game feels to play than whatever story it's trying to tell. But I can appreciate both, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I like to think that you want, like I talked about, that kind of ratio for success is like, I try to think of like, I want a bit of both. And that for me, like a game that plays really well, that doesn't like maybe look the best, I might give like a 7 out of 10, but the flip flop, if it like looks amazing, but it's horrible to play,
Right.
And we're not even talking about the story that's usually interlaced in between there. But I want to talk about a few games that were successful. So when I looked back and, we talk about, success, critical acclaim versus commercial acclaim. And I looked back at the last 3 years, and there were 3 things I kept seeing. I kept seeing Grand Theft Auto 5 because that game apparently just won't die. And then I also saw, games like FIFA and Call of Duty, which, are gameplay focused. Those are the ones that aren't like necessarily about the story. I know FIFA's tried to do story. Call of Duty is actually kind of in a weird way moving away from a story now, because it's like, I don't know, we don't really like, the single player only holds people for so long.
Right.
But then I look at the critical darlings of the last couple of years. I look at games like The Witcher 3. I look at Persona. I look at, Breath of the Wild. But those are a bunch of different games right there. So Ben, like, what's going on, man? Tell me what makes a game, like, what's a great game critically versus like a great game commercially, man? What you're in the industry. Tell me what you have all the answers.
What makes a great game critically and a great game commercially? I think critically, what makes a great game, because when you deal with video game critics, I think game critics probably prioritize innovation a little bit too much. I think a lot of games that get a lot of praise are something that is new, something that either takes a foundation and mixes it up in exciting ways, or presents a new crazy idea. I think a lot of the games that get a lot of media buzz are very prized on that wow factor. And that's speaking in very vague terms. I think that wow factor can be a bunch of different things, but I think the games that are successful commercially are games that carry a lot of word of mouth. When you there are times where I'll do something like mundane, I'll be getting a haircut and we'll be talking about like something like a Minecraft will come up, or theoretically like a Grand Theft Auto 5 or something like that. Games that are built in such a way that they have a consistent and strong presence, and they're easy to talk about, they're easy to understand, they're easy to share with others. Which is funny because like Grand Theft Auto 5 is such an interesting game, right? Like I think you could make a case that Grand Theft Auto 5 is a very complex game, but driving cars and shooting people and having fun, like, it's also a huge playground that I think is also very easy to understand.
That's true. Okay, so well, there we go. It's over. Podcast done. We figured it out. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I kind of want to talk to you just a little bit. I mentioned it before, but I look at games that struggle now because there's this kind of feeling that if a game is received really well, it'll kind of be lauded for certain things and will be remembered at the end of the year. And then the games that were like the worst or the ones that flopped or the ones that we had all this expectation for died off. I'm looking at games like Sea of Thieves, for example, like a recent one, where it's like a lot of people had these lofty expectations and then it kind of fell flat. Those are the games that are going to get remembered. And then you have like this weird middle ground with like a Destiny 2, which I hate to pick on Destiny 2 because I thought the game was solid, but it's kind of forgotten because it's kind of a middling experience where it's like, yeah, like the combat feels good. They tried to do more with the story. They tried to add more things, but it just kind of died off, or it just seems to not really be carrying the momentum that you'd think a group like Bungie would have with it. You know what I'm talking about?
I guess what's the question specifically?
Well, the question, I guess, is just like, why do games like Destiny 2 or other massive games like that who just kind of fall in the middle there? Like, is it because they aren't compelling enough? There's nothing new about them that makes them die off or makes them kind of leave the zeitgeist, as it were?
I think it's all just a matter of scale, right? And so not to pick on game. I think all game. I think that before I say anything else, I think all games are hard to make.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think creating a video game and being an artist and having an idea and following it, however you choose to represent it, is like an incredibly commendable feat. And I have huge respect, regardless of what you're making. But scale is obviously an important factor. And when you look at something like, I want to make a game, I want to make a completely virtual world where you can exist and have something exciting to do every single day. That's different than like, hey, I want to make a point-and-click adventure game that lasts 4 hours or 6 hours. Like both of those games take craft and a lot to do, but I think for these living games, people are like, okay, I need at least 200 hours or whatever high number of hours that they want. I want to be engaged the entire time. I want to be excited the entire time. That's extremely difficult to do. And I think even if you do it well for a little while, like Destiny has, you know, when you're trying to make something that lasts years, there are going to be periods where maybe you try something and it doesn't work out. And so I think to answer your question in a succinct way, the reason these things get bad reception or backlash is because on a long enough timeline, right, what you're trying to do gets harder and harder and harder and harder, I think. Right? Like take a look at World of Warcraft, for example.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, like that game has been going on since 2004, right? And there have been times where it felt like the community was on fire and they were raging and everything was going on. They really didn't like Warlords of Draenor. They didn't like aspects of Cataclysm. They didn't like aspects of Mists of Pandaria. But that game still lived. You know, that game, an expansion could turn it around. A patch could turn it around, because it's always going on. It's like a bunch of games inside one game.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, you know, you brought that up, and I kind of wanted to talk about that for a second. Kind of the living game thing is something we're talking about more and more now, which is interesting to me. But it feels like we're chasing after something that's only kind of a little archaic. I think of like the MMO, which is still around, like World of Warcraft, which is like the biggest one still. But there's so much dedication you have to put into that game. Typically, there's ways to kind of jump up to the next level now, but you still need to put a lot of time into that game. Then you look at other games like Monster Hunter or even Overwatch, which their updates are immediately accessible. It's stuff that you don't have to grind out necessarily hours and hours for. Maybe Monster Hunter a little bit more, but Overwatch for, you know, new character, bam. You don't have to like play for 100 hours to play as a new character. You can play as them in the first, 10 seconds if you can lock on it fast enough. Like it's just right there, and that's why that game, I think, one of the reasons why it's, still successful, still talked about today.
Right. Yeah. I actually want to touch on that a little bit because when you like Monster Hunter World is a really interesting example because it's all about perspective. And it feels like to me, for a lot of people, Monster Hunter World feels like a $60 game where you can play through a lengthy story and encounter a lot of challenges. And then once you beat that, there's still stuff to do. It kind of feels like a very complete experience. And then like these updates that we're getting, they feel like nice bonuses. Having that perspective where it's like, okay, I have this thing that I purchased that I'm happy with, this new toy, and anything else I get is great. That's very different than the way people view something like Destiny, where it's like, okay, here's this open jar, keep putting things in it.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
that it almost, not that it feels unfair, but it really is just a matter of perspective, where if Destiny isn't good right now because it's kind of open-ended, it's really disappointing. Whereas like if an update comes out for Monster Hunter, I feel like the narrative is like, okay, this update for Monster Hunter wasn't very good, but hey, at least we got that cool game. And I think that ties back into just how you choose to define things, right? Because you can get through the story of Destiny 2, the vanilla story, very, very quickly, and you're okay with that because there's sort of this handshake with Bungie, like, hey, you guys are going to keep adding new stuff over time. And I think it is better for developers to, out of the gate, kind of overwhelm you with things to do and really feel like you're content at $60, and then slowly give us bonuses over time. I think people are going to be a lot more understanding. It is rare for a game that is a living game to feel satisfying at $60, and I think that's the big difference. Is your base package worth it on its own? And a lot of times it's not.
That's a really good point. And that's the thing, like you said, the handshake, or it's kind of the thought of going forward and saying like, hey, like, as you're shaking hands, saying like, you're going to give me more stuff, right? And they're like, of course we are. It's coming. Don't worry about it. And you're like, how much is it going to cost? They're like, we've already shook, like, it's too late,
Right. Because I think on some level, when you make that handshake and you're like, hey, you're going to give me more stuff, right? The expectations from players, depending on how long they have to wait, depending on how satisfied they were with the initial base package, they kind of expect you to knock it out of the park every time. And so if you just smash it out of the park and you have a lengthy, satisfying, really rich kind of campaign, as it were, out of the gate, I think you kind of soften the blow for updates that follow that. Like they don't have to be as spectacular if you already make the first step so good. First impressions are very lasting.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, I think too about, with Bungie versus something like Ubisoft and all this stuff. I know those are two very different beasts, but I kind of think of what's under the Ubisoft umbrella, and where Bungie, they kind of, they're working on big DLC stuff. That's going to take a while. And like, if they've got it in the pipeline, they're massive. They try to do bigger things, even though it sounds like a lot of people burn through them quickly. Ubisoft has learned that people burn through content super fast, and they have fixed a lot of their games. There's 2 or 3 that come to mind immediately. I think of like For Honor, where it was last year at this time. It wasn't like a dead game by any stretch, but there wasn't really a lot going on. But now For Honor, like I've been playing it even. I've been like, my buddies have got me back into it. Like that game has changed. Like there's a bunch of free weekends. They've added a bunch of new characters, new maps, new modes, like all this stuff. They did the same with Division, like that stuff, like supporting Assassin's Creed moving forward in a big way and saying like, hey, we're not necessarily going to do one, next year, which they may or may not be doing, but supporting that game out a bit more and adding a bunch of stuff to it, which is like really rewarding and really nice, because when you go to, get another game, if you're going to get Destiny 3 versus, the next like Division 2 or whatever it's going to be, you might be like, well, I don't know. Like, I know that they're going to support this one for sure. They, Bungie will support this in a different way, but just like, kind of adding little things onto a game that does feel much more cohesive, as opposed to saying, here's 2/3 of a game and we promise we'll get you that last third within like 2 or 3 months. It's kind of like a slap in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ubisoft deserves a lot of credit. I think they've really buttoned themselves up in a way that they weren't a few years ago. I think Assassin's Creed is a great example, where it's like, hey, we're making a game that isn't completely broken or plagued with problems, or at least on some level is trying to do something a little bit different with the way combat works, with the way gears work, with the way gear works, and it's not a broken mess, which is really nice. And even Rainbow Six Siege, playing that not all that long ago when the Outbreak update came out, and it's like, hey, here's this new mode that you can play that's completely free, that feels pretty well thought out and put together, and something that's really fun and exciting to check out. I think they've been treating their games well. I can't speak to all of them. It's hard to, like, I totally didn't keep up to date with the Division or For Honor or anything like that, but when I have checked in, it's felt meaningful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, even like Ghost Recon Wildlands, they added that Predator update, and I hadn't played it for a long time. Went back to play that because I was
Yeah.
like, sweet, let's do that. It wasn't a lot of anything, but it was free. I wasn't like,
Right.
oh man, I paid $5 for this like little like go to the circle, go to the circle, go to the circle, fight the Predator. It was like,
Right.
nope, nope, cool. There's the music, great, that's wonderful. And you're like,
And
cool. Now I look like it,
and that's the side of the narrative you want to be on, right? Like Ghost Recon Wildlands is a great example because like I want to check out the Sam Fisher stuff.
dude.
That's
The
a cool.
Sam, it's hype, baby.
Yeah,
It's hype.
it's hype. It's exciting. It's a good thing to do. It's something that kind of piques your interest. And even if you haven't played the game before, like if you have any attachment to Splinter Cell, you kind of want to check it out. That's a good conversation to be having. Whereas like with Destiny 2 Warmind, if you have been lapsing and you're like, oh, hey, this new Destiny stuff came out. Oh, no one likes it. Okay, guess I won't check back in. So
Have you looked into any of the Ghost Recon like Sam Fisher stuff, by the way?
I've seen like little snippets of it, but not.
Have you heard Michael Ironside coming back
Yeah.
as Sam Fisher? But have you heard what he talks about with a Metal Gear character?
Yes, I have heard. Yes,
I love that. So I'm not even a huge Metal Gear fan, but I know you are. And as he talks about it, I love the thought that like they made this joke to say that like all of this is in the same world, and like Sam's like, I'm the only one left. Like,
right.
So good.
Portraying Sam Fisher as like this last hero of the stealth genre is really funny. Like so particularly much. Michael Ironside in that like I eat rocks for breakfast voice. Yes, that is super good. Yeah,
I love it, dude. I'm working on something for it, but Splinter Cell has been just on my mind, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about it later. But and I know that they've talked like leaks and stuff, but man, it's time. Splinter Cell's coming back, and I can't freaking wait, man. Oh, I'm so jazzed for it. I love it.
I skipped over Blacklist, and I think like in anticipation for whatever new Splinter Cell is coming, that'd be fun to go back and play through.
I actually never played through Blacklist. I just replayed through Conviction and then went to Blacklist.
Yeah.
I gotta say it's technically more proficient than Conviction was. The biggest downfall is the fact that the voice actor changed. Because Michael Ironside, he didn't like where they were going with the story, and also he couldn't do all the mocap stuff. But it is desperately horrible to hear him, especially on the phone with his daughter, his adult daughter. And I'm like, you're supposed to be your dad, but you sound like you're me. Like it's like so weird. Like, oh man. Yeah, Blacklist, dude, is super fun, and it has co-op. So I don't know if those servers are still online though. Oh, anyway.
I loved the co-op in Conviction. I like played. Yes. I really liked Conviction. I feel like Conviction gets some amount of hate, but the co-op missions in Conviction and the face-off that happens at the end was just a complete blast with a friend. Had a great time. So.
If for some odd reason, if the servers are still going, I will find if you want to play Blacklist with there's like special you can do solo missions, but they can add co-op to those, and there might be specific co-op missions in there as well that you can do. So there's like spots like in the game where I was going, it's like, oh, you need to co-op dual breach this. You can't go here by yourself. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So let's come back with a friend. Yeah, Splinter Cell. One other thing I wanted to mention, talking about like not really a failure, but I look at Assassin's Creed Origins, which changed up, and I think a lot of people would call a success, but a lot of it's timing. I also think of Horizon Zero Dawn, very successful, critical darling, but in a lot of ways, those games came out on like the wrong year because you come out at the same year as Breath of the Wild, and there's so much kind of overlap, especially with Horizon and Breath of the Wild, that it's hard not to compare. They don't live in a vacuum. So you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes it's just like it's timing. It's like, oh my gosh, of course Zelda comes out and it's like redoing itself completely, and it's like this big open world that doesn't really have the greatest story and some Dark Souls bosses. Like, did you feel that while you were going through 2017 at all?
Did I feel like that certain spaces were crowded? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or like Assassin's Creed is like for all it's doing, and even Horizon, like it was kind of like specifically Assassin's Creed, though, kind of brushed under the rug, kind of like, yeah, it's good, but look at Horizon and look at Zelda, like, but Assassin's Creed is back here.
Yeah, I guess no, because like I understand that they're totally broad comparisons that you can make, but my experience with Zelda and Horizon and Assassin's Creed Origins were all like pretty different from one another. And just to like briefly comment on that, in Zelda, the thing that really hooked me was the lack, the moments of genuine surprise, which just happened over and over and over again, where there would be moments where it'd be like, hey, can I do this? And I would mess around with the world and be like, oh, maybe. And like you kind of fiddled with it and it would work. Like solving puzzles in ways that you didn't feel like you were supposed to be able to. There was kind of this looseness with Breath of the Wild that wasn't broken, but was really fun to mess around with. Whereas Horizon, it was the world that really sold me. Like digging into the mystery of it, and really just kind of awing at these giant mechanical beasts. Like it was kind of the set dressing of Horizon that really hooked me in. Whereas with Assassin's Creed, I liked Bayek a lot,
Yeah,
but
dude.
I didn't dig the combat. The combat was not the best for me. Like it was totally serviceable. It wasn't bad. I would never call it bad, but it was unexciting to me. And to be fair, you know, I played that game for 5 hours, 6 hours, and just wasn't hooked. But I could imagine, like, just the way that Brad and Hubert talk about it now that they've finished the game makes me think that, like, maybe I didn't give it quite enough time. So
I would recommend, if you do have a chance, I know you've been playing a lot of games, I just, like, that game allows you to approach things in a lot of different ways, whereas Zelda and Horizon, as far as combat goes, it's pretty similar all the time.
Sure.
That's one great thing about Assassin's Creed. And it gets so weird with its RPG stuff. It's like eventually you can get like a sword that's on fire all the time.
Yeah.
Why is it? It just is. Like, don't think about it. It's just like, okay, cool. Like, you know, I love that. Like, get weird. Like, and they got weird. This game got weird, man. And it's so good for it. I'm like,
one thing that I will say about Assassin's Creed Origins, playing it on the Xbox One X, like that game is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like there were moments where it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep panning around because I like looking at this environment, and I love when games do that. So.
Yeah, I was even just on my regular old Xbox One, and it was still like I was on the top of that pyramid looking around, doing that kind of like the hero shot or whatever. It's like, oh, pan around, look at everything. I'm like, wow, this is like Egypt is beautiful. I'm like, it's so cool. Like, I want to go back and do that whole like Egyptian tour or tutorial mode or whatever. They kind of tour you through it, and they just kind of talk about stuff, and you don't fight anybody. And it's like, oh, they talked in like a guided tour of Egypt. I was like, that sounds really cool to me. And I feel like that's like games can be educational in a good way. And then they're like, all right, we turn it back on to having Bayek go kill everybody he wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a chance, go back to that one, man. I highly recommend. Well, it depends on how you like to play. I'm more of like the hunter style. I play it like Splinter Cell, so I'm crouching around with a bow, basically jumping off stuff slow-mo, which that last year was all slow-mo hunters with bows, man, jumping.
There was a lot of that. I tend to play stealth as well. Like when given the option, I like to just... I love just creeping up behind somebody and being like, all right, what brutal animation am I going to get here? Like, how are you going to rip apart their throat here?
Dude, I'm right there with you. And I got to say, Blacklist has some pretty rough ones where
great.
Yeah. I won't even say it. It's cool because it's like you won't even look at this guy after you're doing the finishing blow. You're like, I'm gonna keep focusing. You're like,
great.
Oh no, dude, knife, baby, get that sweet. Oh, it's so good. But I also love that a game like that, like in Horizon, I always felt like if I screwed up on the stealth, it was a bad thing. But in like Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed, it's like, all right, now you just have to change to full-on assault combat mode. Because like in some games, when the stealth goes, you're like, uh-oh, this is really bad. Because there's like 4 big machines coming right at you, and you're like, I didn't plan for this. Like, it's not a good situation. Yeah, man. Horizon. I'm excited for that sequel, though. I know it's coming. Yeah. It's got to be coming. Make spear combat better. That spear didn't feel good to me. I don't know if you liked it or not. I didn't like it.
I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. But man, the combat overall, I really liked. Like,
oh yeah,
it was fun. I thought the stealth was really fun. I liked throwing bombs at the giant machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Horizon, man, is one of those games that I had little to no interest in pre-release, and it ended up being one of my favorite games of the year. So
yeah, man. Let's talk about a game
in a year that was packed.
Dude, yeah. Oh, stacked. Talk about a game with like that could use co-op though. Like, man, it would be incredible to be pinning stuff down with your buddies and feel like old cavemen and women together. Like, I feel like that would be kind of wouldn't make sense for that game specifically. The first one with Aloy, it'd be like, all right, Aloy's bringing her 3 nameless, faceless friends. You know, like, come on.
Right.
Yeah,
I think there are so many situations you could create with that combat that would be really fun in Horizon. My problem is that I would have this anxiety of not moving at the pace my partner would want to. Is be like, hey man, no, like I got to collect everything here. Like, we're not moving on until I pick up all this stuff. And so I would just be worried that I'd be boring or otherwise like upsetting my co-op partner. So
it sounds like you don't have the right partner, friend, because that's exactly what I do. So if you need someone to do that, man, like seriously, I pick every corpse. You have to loot every corpse, and like that game, you have to pick up everything because you need to make stuff on the fly. And if you're in the middle of a fight and you can't make arrows, like something's wrong. Like you gotta be like, oh, like I screwed up. Yeah, man, no, that's that. You can remedy that. It's simple.
It is. It's all about the partner.
It's all about the partner. Yeah. Speaking of last year, though, Persona 5, a game that I think you could argue out of a lot of these games had the least amount of gameplay, you know, like I guess you are walking around a lot in that game, and there's obviously the dungeons and stuff, but a lot of that is focused on the story and getting through the text of that story. And that game was very successful as well. Kind of looks like Japan kind of muscling their way into the Western market, this game and Monster Hunter, which is really cool to see. Yeah. But Persona was one of your favorite games, one of my favorite games.
Yeah, my number one favorite.
Yeah. Really great game. But it's interesting how like that game found success, but it was also a very big time commitment. But not a lot of people, I think, thought about that going in. There's like, oh, cool. This is a really cool, like kind of old school turn-based RPG fighting thing, but I'm also like a student. Like, where's the success there? I mean, like it's way more story and not a lot of gameplay. You know what I mean?
And this is actually something I wanted to bring up when we were talking about the story gameplay ratio for success kind of thing. I actually don't think it's the story that makes Persona 5 successful. Like I think if you remove a lot of the small character moments and the relationships that you build in those very personal stories, and you look at like kind of the big broad story, there's some cool stuff that happens. I don't want to completely throw it under the bus, but like I don't think when you go and you talk to people, they're not like, oh man, do you remember like this big, huge, complicated plot? And they launch into things that happen. I think they talk about characters. I think when you talk about Persona 5, people are like, oh man, I love, Makoto, or I love Futaba, or I love Ryuji. Like that's the kind of response that you tend to get. And so I think the reason Persona 5 is successful, and I think the reason people love it as feverishly as they do in some instances, is because that game is built to attach you to someone. You're not going to like everybody. You may not love every confidant that you get involved with, but there are enough of them, and all of them go deep enough that you're probably going to end up loving somebody. And you feel like, because I made this choice with that character, because I took this route with them, you have a very personal attachment. So I think that's where a lot of the success lies.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily, there's not like a easy way to say like, well, go all story and no gameplay and that'll be successful, or vice versa. It just depends on the game. And I think a lot, talking about that game, besides just the characters, I think immediately talking about things that people remember is the art style and the music. Like that really sticks with people. Like I really, it's hard to not think about that. I'm watching the anime that they have on Hulu right now, which is good. If you haven't played the game, you can watch that. It's fine. It's not, as good, I don't think, as the game. It's a nice try, but there's no way they can do it. Have you watched any of it, by the way?
I watched the first episode. It's not that I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy it. It's just hard. Like when like the exact beats that are gonna happen.
Dude, yeah, it's hard going back.
Really, how the characters already evolve. It's fun, and I enjoy it because I obviously love that world so much. But it's really hard, I think, to hook yourself and like play mental games in yourself when you kind of know the finish line, right? In so many ways.
Yeah, big twist, and you're like, oh, okay, like some big twists in the thing. You're like, these things are coming, and you're like, how long is this going to take? How much of this anime are they going to like try to make?
Right.
Yeah, that's good. I completely agree with you there.
It was kind of the same for me, like going and checking out the Danganronpa anime after playing Danganronpa, because that game so heavily relies on surprise and unexpected moments or betrayals from characters, and it's like, in the anime, I was like, when I see them all lined up, it's like, I know what you do, I know when you die, I know when you die, and it's just not the same. Yeah, I think when you take out that element.
So. I will say this though, it is nice to actually hear the main protagonist have like a voice and a name. Like I know I'm supposed to be the main protagonist, but it was nice to have him like say like agree with something or go do something, and I was like, oh, like okay, he's making that choice. He's a character,
Yeah, you're your own person. Sure.
Yeah, but still, nice seeing Sojiro, all that stuff. It's like, yeah, man. By the way, quick question. Did you have a favorite Persona? Was there one that really stuck with you? And you could just say the character, and then you don't have to, if you don't want to give it away. But
Do I have a favorite persona as in like?
Yeah, like the big thing that pops up behind him. And
Oh,
I want to
sure.
be, let's be specific to the characters. We don't have to get into like the guy on the toilet, or whatever, like the demon on the toilet if you can acquire him. Or I don't know if you can or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a hard question just because of the volume. Like I'm kind of like going through a huge list.
Don't go through the huge list. Go through the short list, main
Yeah.
characters.
We're talking Persona 5 specifically, right?
Yeah, we'll
Not
talk Persona 5. And that's the thing too. You reviewed it, I reviewed it, but you've played some of the other Persona games. I'd never
Mhm.
played one before. So like
Yeah.
it's interesting to get different perspectives from people who are new and seasoned to it.
Yeah, let's see. So going through them, I think the one that I remember seeing first and just really lighting up, I think Captain Kidd is really badass. I love Captain Kidd a lot. Uh,
That makes me so very happy because I was gonna say Captain Kidd,
yeah,
baby. What like he's a pirate who's skateboarding or whatever. It's like
yeah,
I I absolutely love Captain Kidd, and then him calling him out. Just Ryuji, just let's tear him apart. One of my favorite. I think I gave the game just a point for just that specific voice line. Oh my gosh, the all-out attack, man. Yeah,
right.
Captain Kidd, pretty dang cool. Having a cannon too for a hook arm instead, like that's pretty great. Yeah, he's great. I didn't like Zoro very much. I won't lie.
Sure. That's fair. Yeah, Captain Kidd is good.
I like Arsene too.
I like Arsene as well. Brad had a Arsene shirt on that I thought was great.
What? Look at that guy.
Yeah.
Too cool. Arsene's
Another persona that I like, and I'm looking up images of it right now, and I love the design of it so much for very specific reasons. Milady is great because Milady, man, there's so many good personas in Persona 5, but Milady is like this nice, like aristocratic, huge, like haughty, kind of what you would expect from a noble person, and then like you just have these guns come out of the dress,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
I love that clash so much.
And that's Haru's,
so
right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Haru's.
And I was I'm not as familiar with her because I didn't really play with a lot of Haru, but I didn't do that shogi player quest thing, so I couldn't switch out party members.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just I kind of had to stick to a group, and I'm like, we're gonna level up this group. I was like, you guys will be my fighters. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones though.
I know you told me to pick one, and I just like keep talking about them. But Makoto's persona, who I can't remember the name of it, but it's just a fucking motorcycle.
Oh.
Like, what is there not to love about that? Like, I know some people think it's stupid. Johanna,
Johanna. I was just saying there's Anna or Anna in there. Yeah,
Johanna. Yeah, that's it. I love that as well. Futaba is my favorite character in the game, but like Makoto is like an inch behind maybe, and a lot of that is because of just the look. I'm a big heavy metal fan, but like the era of heavy metal that I love most fiercely is like the new wave of British heavy metal. Like I really just love like dudes shredding on guitar and little leather jackets and spikes and like bullet necklaces and stuff. And Johanna really speaks to that specific type of design for me, and I love it so much. So
I would argue even that Makoto's transformation, just her look, is the one that is the coolest flip, and it seems like the most different from anybody because you take this kind of straight-laced schoolgirl and you put her like with like spike like bare knuckle brawler and like the cool mask and everything, and she's like, "Let's go! I'm part of a biker gang." The brass knuckles. But and you said you like Futaba. Is there anything specifically about her that you like?
Relatability, I think, is what it comes down to for me in Futaba. People always think it's like, oh, you just find them the most attractive or waifu or whatever, but like Futaba is this like super hardcore introvert, has trouble socializing with people, and finds the most comfort kind of expressing herself through her hobbies. And I think because of work I've had to adapt to things in a lot of way, but like my natural state is like on a couch playing a video game, reading internet forums. So like I kind of understand that character from that perspective. Obviously, there's things going on with like her mother and stuff that I haven't experienced, a lot of tragedy there. But like just that hardcore introvert, I think, speaks to me.
Yeah. See, that's the same thing with me. I love Goro Catchy the most because I'm always out there figuring out clues and stuff. I've
Yeah,
got my
yeah,
little
yeah,
briefcase, and no, I
yeah,
just I really liked Goro though, and I was like,
yeah.
oh,
You and
he's
Brad both. That's Brad's favorite character is Goro. So.
I don't know if I'd say he's my favorite, but I find I like that kind of hero kind of compelling. But man, there's something about Ryuji, the earnesty of a
Yeah.
character like that. There's just something that like he's my damage dealer. He melts my heart every time, and I just love how innocent and dumb he is. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I just love you, Ryuji. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I always get bothered when people find him really, really annoying because I totally don't.
Yeah.
I just love him.
What's like, I don't know. I mean, I can see where people are coming from, but at the same time, like if
Yeah.
you got to give him a chance. I think like if you play through the whole game and you still find him annoying, maybe I understand then. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Anne might be a much higher candidate for being like the annoying one if you don't try to go through more of her storyline.
Right.
So like if you go through Ryuji's story and like talk with him, it's like it really just like he stabs you right in the heart multiple times, and he just wants to be your pal. Like he just wants to go get ramen, man. Like that's all he wants to do, or go running. And it's just like Ryuji, man, best buddy. Best boy.
I think like it's just because I have Huber in my life who like there's never in my life have I experienced a more one-to-one between a character and a person that I'm really close with, like Ryuji and Huber. And I think like my strong affection for Huber carries over to my strong affection for Ryuji as a result. So
sure. See, I don't even have that like relationship with him, so
yeah.
like I just like I'm like Ryuji. I think is just a fun, compelling character on his own too.
They could sub the two and it would be the same. Yeah, it's crazy. It really is nuts.
Just swap them. Persona 5 though, great game. Obviously one of the best. One other game I do want to talk about though, for the past couple of years, talking about success, kind of deeming that however you want to. And typically here, I don't really, I'm not going to say, well, Call of Duty, they're the best games because they always sell the most. I'm not going to say that. But Witcher 3 is one that came out the same year as Bloodborne. And those two kind of went head to head for a lot of people. And those are two kind of games. There are some similarities, but they're also very different. Bloodborne is more of like, you kind of figure out the story if you want to, but it's more about, focusing on that gameplay aspect, being in this horrible world. Whereas Witcher has like, the combat there too, but that one's so much more focused on being like a living world, like a story driven narrative, and that nothing is ever overlooked. And those two games would be maybe some of the big, critical darlings of 2015, I believe.
Yeah.
Where do you stand like with those two? Like, because I know there's always been that kind of debate amongst your group about like, which one is better? And it's like they're so different, but like you can't help but like say, all right, you take the two, and you're like head to head. Like this, you guys have Persona 5 versus Breath of the Wild. It's like so different. Like, how do you compare the apple to the orange?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think it's very frustrating to compare them because I think they're trying to accomplish super different things. But like it should be said, like I've spent a lot of time in Witcher 3. I've spent like 60, 65 hours, somewhere around there in Witcher 3. So I feel like I've spent enough time to speak to it on some level, but I haven't finished it. But that I actually want to kind of use that in my argument that even having not finished Witcher 3 and having not finished the DLCs, I feel like I took so much with me in that time and had so many meaningful interactions and got to see so many cool things. And like meaningful is such a vague word, but what I mean by that is Witcher 3 is a fantastical world with like all sorts of monsters and sorcery and all of that nonsense that feels real. And like, it's a very easy thing to say, but I think it's a super hard thing to accomplish. In any video game, rarely do you feel like people are talking like people. When you like, even if you're just talking to somebody that just sells herbs, like, they have kind of this hardiness to them. They feel like they've lived, and you can dig into that, and you can dig into their history. And they'll joke around, and you'll run into people that are super crass, but they have a reason for that. Like everything. It's hard to run into a game that a character doesn't feel like it's serving a function, right? Like, okay, you know, they may have a personality, but that personality is based around what they're trying to accomplish in this virtual world. And it's the opposite in Witcher 3, where it feels like you have a person who happens to be doing this thing because of their long and complex history. Whereas on the other hand, if you take Bloodborne, Bloodborne is like, I love Alice in Wonderland. And I love Alice in Wonderland because I think it is so hard to make a world where nothing makes sense but is completely captivating. And that's what Bloodborne is. Like, Bloodborne is off its rocker, but the level of detail they go, like when you go into the nightmare, like nothing makes sense. It's crazy, but there's so much detail and it feels like something out there thought all of this out to such a great degree, but made it so foreign to you. And that sensation of like something else out there, all of this makes sense. Like I'm this giant slobbering pig makes sense to somebody. It belongs here. It fits, but it's also deeply unnatural and unsettling. And I think that sensation, like constantly being surprised, like when the whole world flips and like the blood moon in Bloodborne happens, and like there's so many different like paths that you can take where you're going to run into something that is completely different from every other component of that game. And I think that mystery and that craziness is what makes it so much fun to be a part of. So,
yeah. Wow. That was great. I mean, I don't even know how to follow that up.
No, it's okay. I feel like that Bloodborne description was like kind of terrible, but
well, that was kind of terrible. That's your description. That doesn't necessarily mean like it's however you perceive it, you know.
It's hard to describe the Alice in Wonderland effect for me, but
sure. And it's weird because I just rewatched that film recently after going to Disneyland and going on Alice, and that movie is just straight up bonkers. Like there is just no rhyme or reason to anything really, and I get where you're coming from there, and I think I could appreciate Bloodborne a little bit more now after you said that. I think the thing for me, you know, when it comes to those two games is I love to be enveloped in a world, and that's what Witcher 3 does really well.
Yeah.
It doesn't really remind you you're playing a game. That's my problem, I think, with the Souls series. There's always a number. There's always something, and there's always these enemies that are coming back. You know, in Witcher, when you kill something, or a person even, like that thing is dead, you know, for the most part. It's not like you sit at a campfire and you stand up and it just resurrects right there. And obviously these are part of how the games are made and how maybe the narrative in the Souls series and Bloodborne and stuff. But that's why I think Witcher will always kind of stick with me, because when you're in that world, you really do feel like you're Geralt. You feel like you're this Witcher that like everywhere you go, like it's always there. You have people who are happy to see you, or people who hate you, like just upon meeting you. It's just like that right there is so crazy to me. Like everybody's got like this bias towards you or against you. It's just like, that's so cool. And like that plays into everything that you do. If you fight a bandit, if you fight a Leshen, like all that stuff comes into play. And then finding the stories, like the side quests, which are at this point kind of legendary, and it's hard not to compare other game side quests to it, but just going through and finishing up one of these things that can take sometimes a half hour, 1 hour, like of your time. That's just like, you didn't have to do it, but there it is. Like meaningful things that stick with you, which you're like, oh my gosh, I just had to make like a horrible decision. And I didn't even have to do that, but there's some more money and some more XP for me, you know, like that was it. Like, but it's that intrinsic quality that really sticks with me.
I think a big part of that for The Witcher, I agree with you completely, is that like so little of that world revolves around you, right? Like you're not some chosen one. It's not that you necessarily have all of this power that no one else can have. It's just, you know, you are a special individual, and you are an individual that's really made a name for yourself. But there's nothing like untouchable about you. There's nothing like that. There are other people far more powerful than you, and a lot of times you're not beginning things or ending things. You're kind of inserting yourself into stories that are already ongoing and would continue even if you weren't there. And I think that's a lot more interesting than just being some sort of chosen hero.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we're starting to see more of that in games, like a little bit here and there. We still obviously are going to get that kind of, you know, even Horizon, you know, it's like you are kind of like the chosen one. And that one's just kind of fun because you play off that, because you have these people who are like in the future, but they're kind of tribalistic, and they hear like an electronic voice and they're like, oh, that's the, you know, the great mother speaking or whatever. And you're just like, okay, sure. And like Aloy's like, yeah, dude, that's not whatever. I'm not even trying to explain it to you. But I think that's a cool thing, you know, going forward.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you said that that's something that we're seeing more of in games. I actually don't think we're seeing enough of it. Like even Horizon, I would argue that you were very much like a kind of a special chosen one individual. Um, and like even Persona 5, I think a lot of times we give too much emphasis to the importance of the player character, and I think a lot of times it's way more interesting to play somebody that isn't as consequential. And I don't think it happens enough. Honestly, I really don't.
I think it's starting to come up more and more games like Monster Hunter, like Ghost Recon, for
Mhm.
example, where it's more co-op focused, but it's like you're just one of a larger group and they always talk to you. They're like, hey, Fiverr, you're from the Fifth Fleet. You know, like you're
Right.
not like the best one, but like you just every
Well,
one of you is the best one. Kind of.
kind of, because it feels like even in Monster Hunter, right? Like when you're taking down the creatures, they're like, holy shit, like we couldn't have done that without you, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
how, I
that's true.
mean, how potentially cool could it be in Monster Hunter, like when you're going through and they're like, hey, we need you to hunt this thing, and you go and somebody else already took care of it. And it's like, oh, what, whoa, like you took that away from me. I don't know.
That's true. But then again, they always throw shade at you. They're like, I don't know if you're ready for this next thing. And you're like, I killed like the thing that's killing
Right.
everything. And they're
I'm
like, I'm not sure if you're ready for this. And you're like, what?
right.
You're like, I took
I'm
this thing down.
killing gods.
Yeah, exactly.
Killing ancient creatures.
You're like, why is anybody else even part of this fleet? You're like, I can look at things now and they explode. Which would be, but yeah, no, maybe you're right. Maybe they need to do more of that. And I think, it's on very like extreme ends of the spectrum because we have these kind of single player things where you're supposed to feel that way. And then you've got on the other end where it's more gameplay focused, like the Call of Duties, the FIFAs and stuff, where it's like you're playing as just like a soldier,
Right.
or a football player. And it's like, that's all you are. Yeah, that would be cool to see though. I think that's a cool idea. And then I look at other games that like are kind of weird standout ones like Cuphead, where it's like you're just a denizen of this world who just got in a bad way, and like
Right.
you're just trying to fight your way through it. And you're like, all right, this is just me now. Which I don't know how much of that game did you end up playing? Did you
All
play a
of
little
it.
bit? All of
Yeah.
it. Oh,
No, all
nice,
of it.
dude. Look
Yeah,
at
yeah.
you. Did you play on regular?
I did. I did play.
Attaboy.
What were the options at the beginning?
Just simple and regular.
Oh yeah, regular. Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. That's my kind of jam. Like that kind of level of 2D action. Yeah. No, I played it. It was hard. There were definitely moments where I got hung up, but I got through it and felt really good about it and thought it was a fantastic game. One of the complaints that I see levied at Easy Allies Game of the Year is that we didn't bring up Cuphead enough. And I actually think it's totally right. That game was deserved more recognition in our Game of the Year awards. So.
You guys nominated like every other game. So what the heck? Why didn't you nominate Cuphead?
I
It's
know.
like, come
I
on,
know.
guys.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't think Cup had enough of its moment. I think part of it, and this happens sometimes, is like we spend so much of our time like playing games and talking about them or streaming them or reviewing them. And like for me, Cuphead kind of fell into this weird spot where, and this is not a good thing, I'm not defending it, just kind of what happened is I was like, okay, I'm gonna play Cuphead and like I don't have to do anything with it. Like I don't have to review it, I don't have to do anything with it. And so I just kind of played it and it was like a very personal, like cathartic, fun experience. And I think that because it was that nature, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, even though it should have been because it had the quality.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, it was one of our 4 nominees for Game of the Year. So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we were that was how
You
it
did
shook
it.
out. It's just like
Yeah.
that's just like it's hard with Game of the Year because like I know with you guys, it's like typically you nominate so many games, but sometimes I think like that kind of puts you in a bad spot too because you're like, all right, we're nominating all these games, and then it's like, but then you kind of talk a little bit about like why this one beat out all the others. Like if you kind of went down to a smaller group, then Cuphead definitely wouldn't have made it in. If we would have been like, all right, we're only doing, it's gonna be like Breath of the Wild, like Horizon, Persona.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like so I could see where it's kind of a double-edged sword, no matter which way you slice it when you're in the reviewing business. But yeah, get back at it. Like I'll yell at Brandon about that, but come on, man. Well, it's not like it's just Brandon's decision, it's all of your decisions. Every time someone's on here, I'll be like, Cuphead should have been one of your Game of the Year nominees. Like,
Yeah, it should have. It should have. I can always tell because I think you go through different phases with games, right? I think you have a feeling right after you play it, and then the real test is, okay, 6 months later, do I still feel as strongly about that game?
Oh, sure.
And now quite some time removed, I still feel super strongly about Cuphead. Like I still think it should have gotten a lot more attention than it did.
Not that we're funded by this, but they do have those shirts at Hot Topic. I bought one because I was like, I don't know if this will support them, but I hope it does. And like, I feel like the person I talked to after this, like, you deserve a shirt after beating that game, because like some people were like, man, it's like the hardest thing I've ever, like Cup Souls or whatever. And I was just like, yeah, it's tough, but you can do it. You just have to, you got to keep at it.
Right.
Just got to keep going, and then eventually you'll beat the devil.
I think sometimes the Game of the Year format is super frustrating.
Oh yeah,
because I feel like I'm either close to or I play the most games out of the 9 allies. Like we all play a lot of games, but I feel like
you play the most games, Ben.
I feel like I feel like I can say that with some level of confidence that I play like the most. And there are still times like Ori and the Blind Forest, for example. I didn't play that until this year, and that game is great. But like I wasn't nominating it for things because I hadn't played it. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, I played through it for the first time this year or last year. I can't remember. It might have been like the end of last year, I think, on Wii U. And that game is like beyond phenomenal. That game is fantastic. You know, I wasn't fighting for it as heavily in 2014, where I only played a little bit of it. And so sometimes that's frustrating because, like any human being, it's hard to get to all of the great games in a given year, especially when games can be so long, right? Like Persona 5, over 100 hours of playtime. Yep. And so sometimes I just want to give like an award, a Game of the Year award to something that I played much later. So
yeah, well, that just means you guys got to do, well, you kind of did that where it's like your own personal awards and stuff like that. So like we just need to get like a Ben Moore sticker that you can just make and just put it on the box and be like, yep, this was a good one.
But it's great because like we have sequels, right? And like, so now going into the Ori sequel, I always forget the name of it, but now going into the Ori sequel, like that's way more on my radar than Ori and the Blind Forest was at the beginning. So
yeah, that's the hope with a lot of these things that get kind of passed up. So like, oh, you've got that hardcore fan base there, but then other people have picked it up in the years since, and then it's like, oh, cool, like there's that fervor there, which is great. Child of Light's another one that I think about that not a lot of people talked about like a while ago, and that's also a really cool game, kind of similar in that same kind of camp as Cuphead and Ori and stuff. Yeah, great game. Mm-hmm. Well, Ben, I feel like we've talked about that enough. We should probably start to get to the next segment of the show that I like to call Time Killers. The stuff we've been killing time with, the games, the movies, the TV shows. Ben, you said you're playing a lot of games, man.
Yeah.
What are you playing? What, like, I mean, be honest with me.
Yeah. Oh, no. I'm being honest with you. The State of Decay 2 I've been playing a lot of for work. And State of Decay 2 kind of interrupted it, but before that I was playing a lot of Pillars of Eternity 2, and now that State of Decay 2 is wrapped up, I'll be playing more Pillars of Eternity 2. But in my own free time, I've been playing some Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, and these Pokemon rumors have gotten me in a Pokemon kick. And so on our Discord, we've got this Pokemon book club where we're all kind of on a weekly basis working through Pokemon Crystal, and so I've been playing some of that. And I've picked up my long playthrough of Pokemon Sun. I'm continuing that, and having a blast with that. Pokemon is always really frustrating for me because I've kind of had these stings of interest over a long period of time, but like I never review them or I never do them for work. And so they kind of get pushed aside for other things. So I'm trying to like really focus on Pokemon as best I can. But beyond that, I just recently finished and platinumed. It's a very easy platinum, so it's not a huge accomplishment. But Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. I've never played that before. That was great. I think the mini games are kind of bad, but the general like platforming stealth levels were fantastic. Just recently finished Yakuza 4 not all that long ago. So a lot, man. What else is there? Oh, and girlfriend and I are working through Pikmin 2, which is still, yeah. So a lot of weird stuff.
You like watching anything besides all that stuff? It sounds like you got a lot like stuff that you could. But
I was watching a lot of anime. I was still watching My Hero Academia on a weekly basis. A couple episodes behind, but watching like Darling in the Franxx. But the last like 2 weeks or so, it's pretty much just been games. I watch Saturday Night Live every week. I really enjoy Saturday Night Live. And Last Week Tonight are two shows that I enjoy. And Westworld. I'm caught up on Westworld.
Oh, cool. Me too. Yeah. Nice. Have you liked the season so far?
Mostly no, but
Oh,
however, the last episode focusing on Ed Harris's character, William, Man in Black. I loved. I thought that was like some of the best Westworld has ever been. And I thought the Shogun World episode that they just had was entertaining. Like not incredible, but there was some good stuff in there too.
oh
So
yeah, I thought you'd love it. I was like, you've seen that one, right?
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, Westworld's kind of it's interesting. I like Westworld and I think it's very good, but at the same time, I never come away from each episode, and you're not supposed to, but feeling okay. Like you're supposed to
Yeah.
feel like a little sense of dread. It's not as much like a Black Mirror, but I come away and I'm like, hmm, okay, like, all right, okay, Westworld though, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's everything, right?
I mean, I'm probably forgetting something, but like that's a good sampling.
Sure.
So
I have a little bit of overlap with you. I have not played that many games. I played a little bit of State of Decay 2. We did that for stream the other day. That game's fine. It's got some issues. To me, honestly, if you don't have friends with it, I mean, I played 2.5 hours of it, and maybe that's not a fair enough take, but I could start to see the repeating process, and I really kind of like a Ghost Recon or something in that same vein. I think you really should play it with somebody else because I think that will make it better. And it depends on how much excitement you get out of that style of game. So yeah. Besides that, like I said, Westworld, what else? Oh yeah, but I finished this little baby we were talking about earlier. Splinter Cell Blacklist. It's great. I know a lot of people don't like where they've taken Splinter Cell in the last couple of years. That was kind of my entry point, was around Double Agent, but Conviction was the one that really stuck with me. Just rebeat that, which is a pretty quick game, and then got into this, which is very good too. And the ability in this game to choose how to play is really fun, and they reward it in different ways. If you want to go through Ghost, which means you don't disturb anybody, you get like points in that thing. There's Panther, which I think is the true way to play, which is you stalk people and you kill them. Then there's like an assault way where you can go around and play it like kind of Gears of War style. And using that kind of I really love the system in this game where it's the last known position and it shows an outline of you like they do in Conviction, like shooting, and that they've caught you there, and you can run away from that spot, and if they all come to get that spot where they're like, oh, this is the last, oh, where did he go? And you're like, you can use that to your advantage, and using bodies to your advantage, and you can move bodies in this game if you want to. But I was just like, I used that and be like, I'm gonna leave you right there, and someone come run up, and I'm like, whoosh, man, it's just I really like Splinter Cell. I really do. And I really like playing. I loved playing the co-op mode back in the day in Conviction. And I'm sure I would love the co-op mode in this game too.
Nice.
So yeah, can't wait for Splinter Cell, man. Oh gosh, I can't wait. I think that's pretty much everything though, as far as all that stuff is concerned.
You've made me really I was checking, and prices for Splinter Cell Blacklist are really reasonable, under $20. And so
$10.
Like, $10, nice. Yeah, I wanna playing through Blacklist before new Splinter Cell. Like I don't know if it's gonna happen like right now, but in the near future, I'd like to get to it.
Well,
so Splinter Cell sounds good. Sounds refreshing.
Depending on how you do it, and if the servers are still alive, if you want to co-op, buddy, man, anytime. I'm always like, there's something about Splinter Cell that I feel like I actually downloaded Metal Gear Phantom Pain because it's a Xbox free game with gold. I didn't play through all of it. And there's definitely a difference in those two things, but they do kind of attack that same, feeling. But I feel like for some odd reason in Splinter Cell, they nail this feeling of both power and vulnerability. Vulnerability when you get fought or when the lights turn on and you're like, oh no. Like the power you feel when you've knocked out all the lights and you're just hunting people one at a time, kind of like the Arkham franchise. Like, ooh, it's so good, man. It just feels, and getting the headshots. Oh God, it just sounds so good.
Yeah, I can verify that you're a great co-op partner, and I don't think you got enough credit to be like I played co-op with you for the Divinity Original Sin 2 review. It was great then as well. So.
Oh, thank you. I remember you talking about that on the latest Frame Trap, and I didn't know if you were like talking about like if you play with anybody else, but I like if I could just put us in that, that DBZ time capsule, man, and play through Divinity with you or whatever. Like I just like sit there with you because like I really want to play more of that game, but I don't want to play it like without you or another buddy because it's just so much more fun when you're like, all right, I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna get this thing ready and I'm gonna use like a sleep spell on him and like you get over here, like so good.
It's hard because it is extremely fun playing with somebody else. Like even just being in a battle and talking about strategy with somebody else in an RPG is so cool. I think the thing for me is like playing the entire thing, and it's not a short game by
Oh
any
no.
stretch of the imagination. Not only is it like extremely long, but it's very taxing. Like a lot of it is pretty difficult. Um, Going through all of that again, even though you have like the added benefit of a friend, would be tough for me at least right now. So,
Oh yeah, definitely. There's no way. Oh gosh, you're horribly busy. I mean, I am
but
too. So
like maybe Divinity Original Sin 3, you know.
I was gonna say, I was like, dude,
Right.
Original Sin 3 when it comes out,
Right.
inevitably, I'm happy to do that. I think it would just make
And
us long-time friends, you know.
I didn't finish one or even get close to finishing one. And so, hey, you know,
Ah, yeah,
that's
neither did I. I never got out of that first town. Like, I think I even told you, I've told people this at PAX West last year. They had
yeah.
like a little thing at the end where I was asking, he was like, did you play Divinity Sin 1? I'm like, yes. And it was like,
Yes,
did
yeah,
you
you
get out of
told
the
me
first
this.
town? I was
Right.
like, nope, didn't get I played like
Yeah.
20 hours of that game. I was like, just hanging out here. Uh,
That's a very funny question, like for a developer to ask. So
I love it just because it's so pointed, and it's like it was almost as if like one of the developers was just asking me. They're like, "All right, be honest with me. Did you get out of that first town?" And it's like, "No." They're
yeah.
like, "It's okay. We just made
Yeah.
it too good. That first
Right.
town's really great." But yeah, man. Anytime you want to play, oh geez, and that game I think is still, it's just right up there with two. It just two just adds on a lot, But like
Yeah.
that the core is still there at one. But
Mhm.
yeah, let's move on to community feedback and questions. And believe it or not, Ben, a lot of people, a lot of people like you. There's so
That
many questions
surprises
this
me.
week. That is not surprising to me at all. So we'll do this kind of rapid fire because there's a few here, and I want to get through a lot of them.
Okay.
But let's start with beating down Brian, a good friend.
I love Brian. Brian is a
I
very good
love
guy.
Brian too, and
Yes.
Brian, shout out to your border collie Toby. There we go. So I love those pictures on Twitter. That's why I'm on Twitter, is for people like you.
Mhm.
There are many great video game characters who live in a variety of different worlds, all with their own unique rule sets. If you could take any of these characters and just drop them into another world or another game world, just for the heck of it, who would you choose and why? Also, how do you think that would play out for them? All right, Ben, you get to pick one.
Yeah.
Throw in somewhere else.
So you were kind enough to send me a lot of these questions ahead of time, and so I've put some pre-thought into this.
Yes.
Uh,
Proud.
so I want Animal Crossing, right? And I want how Animal Crossing works, where you are responsible for your house and your community. But I want to put it into like the world of State of Decay, where you have these absolutely just precious, charming, interesting, exceptionally lovable characters, and they have to deal with like death and tragedy, which probably makes me like a terrible person, but
Oh,
I
I
think it
love
would
you
make
so
for a
much.
really interesting game. Uh,
That is
like
so fun.
just like Isabel being like, "Hey, Ketchup is dead. We're gonna hold a service. If you could come, I don't know."
You're like trying to lure Tom Nook out into the wilderness by himself, and you're like, I'm just gonna leave you here, buddy. Like, I'm
Right,
done with these
right.
prices.
Yeah.
You're like, get out of here. Oh man, that's lovely. Yeah, I think for me, I kind of thought of a stupid one, but I really one that kind of has a lot of overlap. But I think it would be really fun to take someone like Geralt and throw him into something like Monster Hunter, where it's like he thinks he knows all the monsters in the world, and you're like,
Yeah.
look at that, and he's like trying to do his little shield spell and stuff, and he's trying to talk to everybody, and you have all these like player characters who don't say a word ever, and they just kind of stand around, and they're just like the best badasses, and he's just like, so are you? Oh, bless you, by the way.
Excuse me. Speaking of Geralt, I'm so glad you said that. Geralt and Soul Calibur, man.
Dude, that's such a great thing. That makes me excited about Soul Calibur, and I wasn't before. Like that right there, I'm like, that's pretty cool. And this is the first time he's ever been in anything else, which is nuts.
Yep.
I was like, what?
Yep.
Like, Geralt, man, what a good character. There's probably a bunch of others we could do, but we're gonna move on to the next one. J. Hunter Pearson, he says, question. Please speculate on what you think actual Death Stranding gameplay will be like. What do you think we'll actually be doing in that game from a mechanic standpoint? And do you think it'll be more linear or more open world?
I think Kojima is somebody that takes the lessons that he learns and expands upon them. And so what I mean by that is I think Death Stranding will be very informed by the gameplay of Phantom Pain. I don't necessarily think it's going to be as focused on stealth. I think stealth will be an option. I think it is something that you can do. But I think it will be a big world. I think it will be there will be parts of it that feel reminiscent of the Phantom Pain. And so I think it will kind of be approximating that on some level.
Yep, and I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen actual, like they say they've shown gameplay, but I think they don't want to have it be categorized as like a third-person action and or stealth game, because like once you put it there, it's like, oh, you lose the mystique and the mystery. I'm excited because I think, you know, it's going to be a great 4 hours of gameplay and 240 hours of cutscenes. So I mean, you're only going to be playing 4 hours worth, so don't worry about it too much. It's going to be great. No, I'm just kidding. I got you, Kojima. I keep doing that. He'll be on the show one day. Anyway, but yeah, third person. We're thinking third person action. I agree with you. Do you think it'll be? I think it'll be open world. Like it'll be worldly open world. You're running around with babies. Like it'll be like a survival. Like it's switch out your baby and bring a new baby on there. Do you think we'll see strewn baby canisters around the world?
Yeah, like you could have asked me almost any question about Death Stranding, and I probably would have said like, "Hey, do you think we'll see this?" Like, yeah,
okay,
probably.
Then we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Fragadin, we're gonna take this down. It's gonna kind of be a little bit depressing here for a second. We constantly see leaks and spoilers for games to be announced leading up to E3, more and more each year. Can you recall a leak or spoiler that simply destroyed you in that moment? Spoiler could have been a book, movie, as well as a game. It can be as vague as possible so we don't spoil for others. All right, so Ben, this is a safe space.
Yeah.
You ever see something that really messed you up?
Messed me up, I don't know, but like took the moment away. Yes, I have. It's hard remembering specific moments. I feel like it's happened with Star Wars, and I feel like it's happened with Game of Thrones. But it's also hard because I think like Game of Thrones is something I love. I love, like a deep love of Game of Thrones. And it's hard for me because waiting a week for episodes with Game of Thrones is difficult. And so I've been guilty of like going on the wiki and learning about a character. And so I've like self-spoiled myself. So it's hard to like separate self-spoilers from Twitter spoilers. But I know it's happened. It's just hard to recall exactly what it was.
Fair enough. It's kind of hard for me to talk about. It's 2002. I was 12. And I really got into Fellowship of the Ring. Saw some stuff in that movie that I had never seen before, and it really stuck with me. And I couldn't wait a full year. You talk about waiting a week, and I had to wait a whole year. And then in the trailer for Two Towers, something happened. We saw a character completely undercut. Well, actually, there's two things in that trailer. There's two big characters that have things that happen in that movie or not, and I'm like, and I just kills me just a bit. When you go back and watch those, like if you know what I'm talking about, you'd be like, oh yeah, you're totally right, because like those moments should have been like, oh, and it's like, here we go.
I did think of one. I knew about what happens to Aerys in Final Fantasy VII well before I encountered that scene. So
fair enough. Okay, help me. I haven't looked this up. Is it Aerys or has she ever been Aerith?
It's technically Aerith. Yes.
Okay, I want to call her Aerys, but then there's like Aerith, and I just Which I used to watch that scene. I recorded that on a VHS when I was younger and would watch that because I was like, this is so crazy. Like it's like, look at this weird scene. Next question comes in from Discard. This is for you specifically, Ben. You gonna do any changes to your daily routine for preparation for E3?
No.
Live your dream.
Well, and the reason I say that is because like there is no daily routine now. Like it's just so weird where it's like, okay, we have to shoot this thing, or no, now we need to move this over here, and they're gonna have this reveal stream for this thing, and so it's already. I mean, it's gotten more organized a little bit, but there's still like the video game industry is just a little chaotic on when things happen and when things are due and what's coming up when. And so E3 is the most chaos. And so no, it's hard. It's hard to prepare for E3 in some ways.
Perfect. That's fair enough. Cal G writes in, he first off says, this is dope, referring to being on the show, which I completely agree, it is dope. Not sure if this is relevant enough for a question, but I want to hear Ben's thoughts. Now that Dragon Ball Super's run is over, I'd like to hear thoughts on the series as a whole. Was it a worthy successor to Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, so I should, again, preface this by saying I haven't totally finished it yet. I'm on episode 86, but I can give my thoughts on it like right now. A worthy successor to Dragon Ball Z. I don't know if I would say that it is, but That's a really hard question. Like not to drag this on too long, but like Dragon Ball Z was a really formative anime in the West for a lot of people, and like just the general acceptance and recognition of anime as a whole. Like it was really explosive and huge in a way that, like, when you say it is a worthy follow-up, you're kind of saying this thing that just became so big that it would be hard for anything to follow it up. And so like a worthy follow-up in that sense, no, but I think it's super fun. There are elements of it that I think are disappointing. I think that some episodes are super boring. I think some entire storylines are super boring. But Dragon Ball Super certainly doesn't take itself very seriously at all. There is a lot of goofiness with new characters, a lot of goofiness with characters that you already know and love. And they're not afraid to mess around with them or play around with them. And I think if you have an affinity for Dragon Ball, specifically Dragon Ball Z, it'll be entertaining. I'm entertained. That's my ultimate takeaway from Dragon Ball Super is I'm entertained.
I feel very similarly about Naruto and Boruto. Cal, he's Mr. Garriok. I can't. That's exactly how Boruto feels for me after watching like 500 or 600 episodes of Naruto or whatever. It's like it's nice to be there in that world again, but it's like, how are you ever gonna, be worthy of that?
Right.
It's so hard.
Right. This doesn't make sense on so many levels, but just hypothetically play with me here. Like, imagine they're like, and Akira 2 is coming out. And it's like, well, okay. It's a hard thing to do. Yep,
exactly. It's like when they're like, we're making Hobbit movies. Anyway, next one. E3 has been, this is from Lynn Redder, by the way. Great art, Lynn. Keep it up, seriously. E3 has been in hype for quite some time now with a lot of promising stuff. Is there anything you two are concerned with or afraid won't live up to the E3 Hype Fest? I think one that comes to me immediately, is Anthem. Like I'm not gonna say I built it up too much. I kind of feel like I know what that game is, but I'm just nervous a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, am I worried that anything won't live up to the hype? I guess Death Stranding might be one. It's not that like I'm down on that game or don't think the game is going to be good. It's quite the opposite. Like I'm quite interested, but I have such a nebulous idea of exactly what that game is going to be. And I think when you're at that state where you really don't know what to expect, there's kind of room for disappointment. Cyberpunk is one that I'm thrilled about. Like I can't wait to see it, but my expectations, especially post Witcher 3, are so high for them that I hope it lives up to expectations.
I'd say don't be so worried about that one because I think it's going to be so different. Yeah. I think that's one of the nice things because if you go into Witcher 4, people, like you talk about a follow-up to Dragon Ball Z, like a follow-up to Witcher 3 after so many people have talked about for so many years now, it's just like, it's probably good that they're doing something completely different. I think that's
totally.
And just a few more questions here. I got to ask this one. This is from Bite Size Manga. And Ben, I know I'm throwing two at you that you didn't prep for. Is that okay?
That's okay.
You ready? Okay. We got a fan here from Easy Anime. And he asks us if there's any chance about doing the show maybe monthly or bi-monthly as like a Google Hangout.
Of Easy Anime?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The takeaway from Easy Anime is that it's not dead. And I enjoyed doing it. I know Brad enjoyed doing it. But I also don't want to give like people expectation of like, oh, it's coming back any day now or anything like that. I think for me, honestly, if Easy Anime were to come back, and this is all just like shooting the breeze here, I would want it to be different. Like we have so many shows where we're just sitting down at a desk talking to each other, and I think it's great, and I think we can do a good job of that. But I would want it to be a little bit different for Easy Anime. I would either want the conversations to be more structured or maybe have it be more of a produced thing. I don't know exactly what that means, but I would want a hook for Easy Anime in a way that makes it stand out a little bit more, because some criticism that we got with Easy Anime, and I think it was totally fair, is it's like, well, who is this for? And it's like you have people watching it that know a ton about anime, and it's like, well, they're not really offering new insight, or they don't have like the level of experience that I'm looking for, which is true. But then I think you have people who are brand new to anime or really casual anime fans where it's like, well, this is also a little bit too deep for me. And so I'm not really, I think we need to make a stronger case for it. I think we'd have to have like a stronger vision for it than we did in the past. Because in the past, I think it was very self-serving in a lot of ways where it's just like, we are really excited about anime and want an outlet to talk about it, which I think is like a totally fine and honest way to come to something, but maybe not the best for our audience.
Fair enough. Well, it sounds like there's just passion out there for the show at least. And I know I enjoyed the show too. And even though I'm kind of like, I would listen to ones that I haven't heard anything about that anime and other ones where I'm like, yep, I know that anime pretty well, like Hellsing Ultimate. So there's not a lot to it, but I'm like, yep, I remember that stuff. Pretty cool. Like pretty messed up. Well, thank you for your candor. Last one, Missile Mage. RPG mechanics seem to be getting introduced into more and more games. Personally, I love diving into different and new systems and finding out their intricacies, but a more casual gamer, like my brother, just wants to sit down and play a game and not have to worry about how to develop a character and go through menus. Do you think RPG mechanics are possibly being introduced into too many games? And what games do you think you could recommend for people like my brother?
That's a tough question. Well, first of all, like some people just aren't going to like things, and that's okay. And forcing it rarely helps. But an analogy that I make sometimes with my girlfriend, because it just was super important to me, is food. Growing up, I was an extremely picky eater, and as I got older and as I came out here and I had access to so many different things, it's like, I really want to try to like more food. And that's not an easy process because if you're not familiar with certain types of flavors, it's really hard for your tongue to adapt. And you kind of have to force it. And I remember like even coffee was like that for me, where it's like the first time I had coffee, it was terrible. And sometimes you can't trust your first reaction. Like sometimes you kind of just have to let something suck, especially if you don't understand it, and really give it time and give it multiple attempts of it sucking, because the more time that you spend with it, the more you'll understand it, and maybe you'll reach a level, you'll kind of go up a little bit and be like, oh, okay, I can appreciate this in a way I couldn't before my initial reaction because I understand it better. And so I think maybe RPG mechanics might be like that for you, where like you're just so resistant to it that you're not willing to let it suck for a little bit of time. But like as far as a game goes, how light are we talking about with RPG mechanics?
As light as you want to go, I think. You know, you can pick whatever you think of.
Because like on some level, I think like Fortnite is that, right? Like you're progressing in rank and earning things, and you're getting different types of loot that all have different attributes that are useful in certain situations. But it's like extremely light, for example. I don't know.
I would recommend one that I always talk about, but do the original Darksiders. It is an action-focused game that has very, very, very light RPG elements where it's like you pick weapons, and as you use them, they get stronger. And like you can buy combos and stuff, but you could still just kind of go through that game just hacking and slashing. So I'd say start with some games that only have like introduced light ones, as opposed to jumping into something that's a little bit more intense, like a Persona would be like, wow, that's like, it's very different, and you're trying to, not that game you have to min-max so much, but that might be another step up before you're getting into some really hardcore stuff. So
yeah, I think it's a great idea. As far as like RPGs go, because sometimes I get that question where it's like, hey, I'm not into JRPGs, but like I'm kind of curious, which one should I jump into? And I think people overthink it. Like if something seems aesthetically interesting to you, or just cool, or you like the main character, or you just like the vibes of something, just pick that. Like, you know, look at your Final Fantasies, look at your Dragon Quest, look at your Personas, look at your Niers, look at your Xenoblades, look at everything, and just be like, I just think this looks the coolest. And don't overthink it. Just trust your gut, because if you can buy into the way something looks, I think you're more willing to understand it.
Yeah. And you have the tool, like the best tool, which is the internet now, to be able to research it to any length you want to. You can watch the entire game played out. So if you want to look into it and you're like, that looks cool, let me see what the gameplay is actually like. Oh, cool. Like the fighting looks sweet. Like Nier, you're like, sweet. Nier Automata looks like sweet, like a sweet game I would like. There you go. Just give it a shot. Totally. It also helps you if you look for games that are a few years older. because sometimes the barrier for entry can be a little bit easier, smaller hurdle to leap over if you have a game that's $10 or $20 as opposed to like 60 or 64.26 or whatever is the tax. So yeah, that's what I would recommend to do with your brother. But yeah, there's a lot of RPG elements in games. I think that's just another way to make games seem like they're longer or add more to them. To be like, yep, now you can upgrade this and this and this and this. So yeah. All right, that's enough for questions. We're done with that. But if you ever have a question for the show or for me, you just have to tweet the hashtag Critical Podcast. You can tweet at Critical Reviews, the Twitter account, which is @GoCritical, capital G, capital C. Or you can tweet at me personally. I'm at JimmyGood013. However, if you just want to tweet at Ben, just ask him a question or just tell him he's doing a good job, where can they find you, Ben?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BenMore035. I wish that Twitter was a little bit simpler, but it's fine.
Believe it or not, though, I was inspired when I got my own personal account by you, even though I know 34, I think you said, is your favorite number, and you had to go up to another one. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing, but it's just going to, 13 is my favorite number. And I was like, well, just do this, all right, because somebody else says Jimmy Good. Yeah, that'll drive you nuts. We're talking about games, and actually, believe it or not, we do stream them here if you want to check us out on twitch.tv/critical reviews, or you can watch Ben play games pretty frequently over at twitch.tv/easy allies. He's doing it right now, believe it or not. Like he's
mostly continuing long playthroughs of a particular RPG or streaming Monster Hunter with some other allies. So.
Yeah, which we're going to try to get into ourselves here. I'm trying to find the right RPG. There's been some Final Fantasies thrown around that people are like, we should just do it from start to finish. And I'm like, all right, like we'll find one.
All Final Fantasy from start to finish?
Oh, no, just like picking one or, one of them. That'd be, I feel like that's a lot. Oh, boy. Yeah, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank This Is Dale for our theme music, and I want to thank the one and only Joran Evers for doing pretty much all the art you see here on the show. Joran, unfortunately,
extremely talented individual.
Yes, he's extremely talented, and in the past, I would say you should hit him up on Twitter or Instagram for a commission. However, he's not doing those anymore because he's working on a comic, and here is the blurb he gave me to read. When David opens a mysterious box that transforms his arm into an alien weapon, he at first uses it for good to right the wrongs of his high school. But as more of his body is transformed, he finds that playing God comes with its own set of new, self-destructive perils. At its core, it's like Venom meets Chronicle. So keep looking forward to that. Check him out on Twitter and Instagram to see updates on that project because it's incredible. Joran is just doing some amazing work, and we love him for it. And if you actually really like Joran's, you can't get a commission anymore. However, the only way you can kind of do that still is if you donate to us on patreon.com/critical reviews, where you can get picture of yourself with your face on an avatar of one of our legionnaires, and there's different ranks and stuff like that. If you're at the $100 tier, you can actually design every little intricacy. So you can still kind of get a commission, but you're helping us out at the same time. But if you want to support Ben, you should go check out, let's see, it's patreon.com/easy allies. That's the best place to do it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Ben, is there anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up here, pal?
No, none to plug. Just thanks for having me on. Thanks for the conversations. I'm not the most concise of guests, so hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. But
are you kidding me? People who watch this show are looking for something concise. And thank you so much for being on because I love having you on. It's been too long, and there's not supposed to be any sort of pun in there. It was a good time, not a pun in there either. We're just playing with names right now, but yeah, it's a true pleasure, and I really love talking with you. And I think everybody, if you're kind of on the fence about stuff, please go donate to the Allies. They're a great group. They've inspired us a ton, and they're great. They're a great, fantastic group of individuals, and you should definitely check their stuff out. So thank you, Ben, for being on the show. Hope to have you on again sometime. And if not that, I just want to play some games with you. That would be the best thing.
Playing games is the best thing. Yes.
Isn't it the best thing? I love movies and stuff, but there's something about games.
Yeah.
So good. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And just remember to adapt and overcome. And we'll see you next time. Bye.